Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for coming here to my lecture and deciding to start your day with me. Uh, and thank you also to Digital Dragons organization team for inviting me to talk about one of my most favorite things and topics, which is building towns. My name is Katya. I am currently an expert level designer at 11-Bit Studios here in Poland, in Warsaw. I have about 10 years of experience in level design professionally, majority of which I have spent working on AAA open world games. I have specialized in world building, and I have worked on the Assassin's Creed and the Division franchises. Okay, so I was going to have some screenshots of levels I've done, but I don't know why they're not working. Imagine very beautiful cities with a lot of landmarks in them and also like aqueducts in them and all kinds of pretty stuff. So today I'm going to talk about what is a town, why are they important and why should we care about them. Also, I'm going to go through different components that I believe would help you a lot when you want to create a town that is more believable and therefore more immersive. And so we're going to talk about world logic, the human flow, also what makes a community so we can represent it better. We're going to talk ever so slightly touch upon topology and also town districts and how to plan a town. On that, the last thing, I'm going to go super quickly just because of how complex of a theme it is, and I'm going to give you just the bare essential because it could really be a separate talk of its own. And finally, what to expect from this talk is the point of view of a world builder on how you can get inspired by the real world and the logic of the real world in order to create something believable. Because of the time limitation, I won't be able to go that much into gameplay. So, let's get started. What is a town? Well, a town is a type of location in your game world that usually depicts where the local population resides. It often contains within itself smaller locations or points of interest that can vary in gameplay. Towns can also be based on a real one that exists in the real world. It can also be a fictional one in terms of the layout and what it contains is completely made out by you. And it also can be a combination of existing ones or fictional ones in order for you to create something completely unique for your game. Like all of these are completely valid. Also, something cool about towns is that it's a location that can serve several different purposes all at once. So some of the roles can be, imagine this is an open world game. Most of them are separated in different regions, and each of the regions has different locations with different types of gameplay, so like military ones, puzzle-y type setups, and you also have your town. So this makes the town, puts it in a unique position where it can be the capital of your game region. So when you look at your open world game, like each of these towns, you can use it as the capital of each region, which makes it also great for fast travel points. Also, when we zoom inside of the town, as we said, inside you can have a lot of locations. So it's a great smaller location hubs. So like in a more contained, smaller places, you can have a lot of varying gameplay. Also, a great way to stack up some quests together. So like a place where you can start quests, return quests. It's a great quest hub. Again, it's a really cool character maintenance spot. So like everything that you would need to, everything the player might need to level up their character, get some new gear, repair the O, it would make sense that they will find it in a location like this. And something that is pretty cool about towns is that it also serves as a checkpoint for players. And I don't mean it in the technical term of checkpoint. I mean it more as a I'm sure like most of you have been in a situation where you've asked someone, how far are you in this game? And they would reply something in the lines of, oh, well, I just reached the first town, or I just completed the third one. So towns have the unique property of serving as a mental checkpoint and mental way to track progress in your game. So why are towns important? To give you even more reasons, is that they are locations that are visited multiple times, unless the majority of locations in open world games where they have an objective, you complete it, maybe you're done with it. Also, town locations are bigger in terms of size, so they're quite expensive to make. And something, again, a unique property is that towns intuitively draw players' attention and they trigger an eagerness to explore. I think this is because like we as people have been programmed from like ancient times to associate any kind of settlement with like shelter and safety. So whenever we see a town in a game, we like want to explore, want to go there and check what is it about. So all of those make towns really an excellent canvas for us to play around and create some things that would help our game feel more immersive. Things such as we can depict different cultures, show more of the life of the people who live here. We can depict some history, we can depict some more environmental storytelling, and we can help out the narrative team with creating more context and background for game characters, for quests, or for different storylines. So for me, a better town is one that the players can really imagine their life there. And I don't mean it in the cozy, like super pretty way. I mean it when I make a town, I want people to imagine what their life could be like there with the environment. This means that that way I'm creating an environment which is believable, and therefore more immersive and a better open world town. So what we want to avoid is we want our towns to feel repetitive or like randomly scattered. We want players to be able to like pinpoint something that stands out in the layout of this town, like something recognizable, something that can easily be associated with this town, or easily depictable different gameplay areas in this town. So now, without any further ado, let's go into the different components that could help you create this better town. First off, I'm going to start with world logic, because this is something that can apply to pretty much everything. So world logic is a term that is used for describing when you use and transfer real-world understanding and functions into our game's environment. What those lots of words mean is that each space in real life was built to serve a specific purpose. And the way that it looks, the way that it functions, it is all tied to that function. So as we are like living our life and doing our things day to day, we have built a like expectation and understanding of these functions, and before we walk into a space, we already expect what is going to happen there because we've probably experienced something similar somewhere else. So this is to be taken in consideration because this function really defines the shape, the size, the sequence of events that player would expect to take in a space. And we as level designers can really take this and use it to our advantage if we want to make our locations feel a lot easily understandable and even more universally understood. So, quick example, hotels. Like, we've all been to hotels, even now, maybe even in one of those, I don't know. So, hotels, no matter how they look on the inside or the outside, they have a single function, mostly, like mainly a single function, which is to rent a room. So again, like even if it's a more abstract shape, if it's like something that you haven't seen before architecturally wise, because of its function, you know that when you go inside, you are going to find a main entrance, so like big enough to fit you and your luggages. Also a reception desk to get your keys. And then some sort of way to reach your room, so like elevator, corridor, stairs. And finally, you will have your room. So why I'm saying all of this is that if you break down the location's functionalities and like expected elements of this location, you can really dress it however you want and put it in other contexts. So, for example, medieval tavern. Maybe not many of us have been to a real medieval town and tavern, but if we want players to understand the space, we can use elements of the real world that they know and place them here. Also, if we're doing something futuristic, we can totally use this as well. Like players will be able to relate to what they know from the real world and they would understand our space better. Also, if it's a historical space, and especially important if we're doing something abandoned or if we don't have any NPCs to further help us understand this space, this is a great tool to use. Because like a hotel without a reception desk is just a big house with lots of bedrooms. So I talked about world logic elements, like I called them defining elements. Well, this is part of the world logic. World logic elements are these like exact defining elements that absolutely define the area, and without them, the area will be harder to read. So I would really propose that if you're making something completely fictional, to still like try to figure out how this location would function if it was real, to like find out what players would expect to find there, and also does it have, even if it's like completely made up, does it have something slightly similar to the real world, so you know to like what to how do I say like. To have an idea of what players might want to experience there. So I'm saying all of this because this really helps you build a solid world logic foundation of your location, which can really give players less suspension of disbelief so you can break it somewhere else. And also another reason why I'm telling you all of this, because I want you to break the world logic by design and not by mistake. Just because of breaking it by mistake could really make even like the most beautiful and thought out location feel a bit weird. So that is why I just want you to be aware of this and use it to create something memorable instead. So here's a quick example of, you were going to see this town in the broken slides, but whatever. This is from the town of Canterbury in Assassin's Creed Valhalla, which I had the pleasure to make. And I wanted to make a tavern inside of some Roman ruins. So Roman ruins had like some player expectations to them, and I really had to completely scratch that and make it into a tavern. So what me and my artist did, we established what are the defining elements of a tavern. And even though we haven't been to an Anglo-Saxon tavern, we like put people drinking, dancing, bards singing, lots of barrels, lots of tables. And when players walk in, they don't see the Roman layer. Like maybe they see it, but it's not the main thing. They see, oh, this is a tavern. This makes sense. And some other, I don't know if you can see it, it's okay. Some other place that is right across the street from the tavern is I have an ancient Roman amphitheater. So here I broke the player expectation by design, but I used the game's logic. So it's an amphitheater. People would, I would assume, would expect to see like plays and actors and requisites and what kind of things. But Anglo-Saxons did not have that worldview and logic. They had no idea what a amphitheater is, so they decided to use this as a pigsty. So they saw the shape and were like, yes, this is a perfect place to store our pigs. That would be amazing. So this way, I tried to create something memorable for the players to walk in and be like, what are you doing here? And also another general way of thinking that could really help you is the human flow, and to think about the human flow. So this is the natural and logical movement of the people that live in this space. This is asking the question and finding answers to how do people actually live here. So A quick disclaimer, this should not be confused with level design flow. This has to do with the imaginary residents of this place and the NPCs and not the player that much. So the reason why I do this a lot is because I want to understand how someone would live in this space so I can create something that seems legit lived in, not just scattered structures. Like really people have adapted this place to their way of life. So the way I do this is that I imagine the life of someone who lives there. I try to imagine where would their house be, what would they work, how would they get in water, how are they going to get groceries, and also like in general what their daily routine through this town might be and what their commute would be to different locations. Also because it's a town, it's not like a single person living there, I try to think about it as a whole community also. So if there's a big event, where does it take place? If like the king wants to make a speech, where do people gather? Which is the popular space where people meet and gossip? Like all kinds of things that really can make a place feel alive. And it's also a super, super nice way to plan out the traffic in your town so you can balance it out better. Here's a quick example. We have one town here, and we can imagine the daily routines of a bunch of people. Here they are, minding their own business, doing their own things. So by quickly doing this thing, we can obviously see a traffic issue here. So we have one bridge that is quite heavily trafficked. We have one that like no one is using really, maybe the people who live in that space and that's it. And we have a pretty big chunk of the town that is not connected at all. So like people from the central part will have to walk all around to reach their friends at the other. Oops, something happened. So like we know that if this was the real world, people would probably take this into their own hands and like make their own bridge or like stack boats together and walk on top of them rather than having to make that huge reroute every single day. So we can see this issue and fix it. Let's put a new bridge there. And that way we can balance out the traffic and make the place like really used by real people. And speaking of people who are walking around our streets, super quickly about human population. So your towns really need some sort of population in order to really use and do all of some of the things that I just talked about. When you design your towns, always make sure to plan out crowds as well. Like people who would be walking the streets, would fill the spaces, also like some animated stations of NPCs doing an activity or something are, very, very appreciated. And also like some scripted scenes of the locals doing something in this confined space of the town would be really, really cool. Because otherwise you really risk your towns to look abandoned. And if that's not the design, we don't want that. Here is a quick example of Boagrae. This is a town that I did for Assassin's Creed Origins. So here in the street you can see people crossing, children playing, some people gathered at the stairs like discussing something or protesting something, I don't know, spoilers. We see like merchants selling merch, people playing with a cat instead of buying merch. So little situations like this can really give a lot of life into your location. So here we have the different things that really build a foundation for a community. So this is important because in order to make a believable town, we need to think of it as a real functioning community. So I have divided these foundations into 4 different categories, and we'll go quickly through each one of them. And there are 4 categories that you can really use and go into in order to come up with to find some big world logic elements for your town as a general or for the different districts. And you can also come up with fitting ideas for locations, landmarks, or unique selling points. To like really make your town stand out, especially in an open world game where you have like 20 other towns. Yours needs to stand out in some way. So first up, the first category, we have culture and religion. So this is something that can really, really strongly define the sense of identity, belonging, and like create a sense of beliefs in a place, which can really impact the culture. So when I start to make a town, I always think of what are the beliefs that people here practice? Are there any like celebrations that they have? What sort of space do they need to do these type of celebrations and to practice their beliefs? Is it more of it's a single structure where everyone gathers and they also use it as a social gathering space? Or is it more of this is an example with the many houses that I really like. It's in the island of Bali, where every single house and every single like shop or anything has their own temple. So like their beliefs are that people have sort of practices that they do at home and then ones that they do at the big temple. But this is directly affected in the architecture of the place, and it's something unique of this space. Next category we have is crafts and trades. So this is actually asking the question of what do the locals produce and how. This is something I'm super guilty of using all the time. I love to do this in locations. So this is picking out things that would be fitting for this culture and these people there to show their way of life even more, to show like what they produce, where do they store it, how important it is for them, because like if it's super important goods, you even put like some more guards and turn it into a big guarded thing, which could be cool. And it can really define a unique selling point for your town. It could be, this is the town where they dye leather, because like this has such a big architectural like effect from it. Next up, we have political and social structure in your town. So you can also get inspired for the locations that you have inside of it from how is the town governed? Is there any sort of social inequality? Are there any conflicts that are outside or internal? If they're internal, maybe there's rebels, so there's like more graffiti coming up. And lastly, we have history, last but not least. This is figuring out what are the major historical events that have happened before the player stepped foot in your town, and also like what is the general things that this town has been through before the game or there, yes. So it could be a natural disaster. Maybe something very traumatic like that happened. It could be an attack. Maybe the town was sieged at some point. How did that affect the layout and the people? Also, it could be this town was conquered by a different culture, so this left an imprint on the space. It could be also something like the town is in economical boom or industrialization, so there's a lot of new structures being built, a lot of workers everywhere, so it could be something like this as well. Quick example, when I had to work on Balagrae, that's the Greek town, I had to build a town which is centered around a temple of Asclepi. I had no idea what that is, so the first thing I did was to check out who is Asclepi, what was he famous for, and like what did the people who worship him actually practice and why. So it turns out that Asclepi is a god of healing. So basically his temples are ancient hospitals. So this was quite interesting. I went to see like the different types of healing practices that people did back there to come up with ideas for the temple complex itself and also the town. And I found something quite cool. Apparently, people back then used some sort of clay body parts in order to heal themselves. Like they would buy these and get them to the temple and like put them on the walls so they can like manifest health for whatever their issue might be. And I had an idea. I can take this theme outside of the temple and really place it like outside and create a more big theme with it, a more like environmentally complete theme where you can actually, when you go into the town, you can see where people get the clay, you can see where people like make those body parts, they bake them for the lack of a better word, they load them into carts, And lastly, we see them at the tempo. So this way, I got this like theme, and I spread it around to create a more complete, flowing explanation of what this is and how it got there, in order to make the town a bit more interesting and also believable. So quickly about topology and nature. Those are quite important to take into consideration always when you start working with your town, because they can directly influence how your town is built. They can influence the visual identity of your town, the way it was built, like literally with the architecture, the shape of your town, and also they can inspire crafts and trades. Like if your town is built in a forest, maybe the people there are woodworkers. And also, it's not just the topology in general, like it's not just the mountains and the rivers and whatnot, but also the type of soil, the type of terrain, the climate that this town is situated in. All of those can affect your town as well. And if you like pick up something you like, or you were already given a place where you would place your town, apply world logic to this thing in order to find how it would change. Quick examples. This town, I really like how it looks. So first thing we can see is how the climate here and like how the lack of rain in this place has affected the architecture, with the roofs being square. So there's no need for water to drain, so why would they build triangular roofs? Also, the color of the place, like it is very often, I'm not sure how applicable this is to modern towns, but if you're building something older, or like a town that has older elements in it, mostly people use like things that are in the surrounding area, except for like ancient Egyptians, but they're special in that way. But they would use like the rocks that they have around them, which would be this red color, so their buildings are this red color as well. On the other part of the world, we see a place where it's a lot more rainy. So we see triangular roofs are back. We also see that living spaces are not built directly on the ground, but they are like raised up in these sort of structures, just because of how muddy the ground would get from this constant rain. And another super cool location that I love, this is Yunnan, and it's a town that is built in a very, very mountainous space, and it's like they have so little flat building space that they actually like build their structures on top of the river. And like just by looking at this, you can really tell how the river raises its level at some point, so that is why people have decided to leave the first floors empty and like on these columns, so they don't like flood their apartments. So what I'm saying is that people usually build according to the terrain they have. So your town will look completely different if it is built on top of an old quarry, or on top of a swamp, or in a cave with like little to no light, on the edge of the waterfall. That would be pretty epic, like on the side of a canyon, on the beach, in a harsh, wintry, very, very, very cold environment. I wouldn't want to live there, and also in a forest. And last, but absolutely definitely not least, is the town districts and planning. So this is about how to combine and organize everything that you come up and everything that you found and you think it would be a cool, fitting idea for your town, and placing it together in a logical way. But, as I said in the beginning, this could be a talk of its own, maybe next year, we'll see. But it is also very defined by the context of what you're actually making, what time period it is in, what do you want the story to be like there. So I'm gonna show you the absolutely essential general way that you can break down your towns to use this. So, first off, we have zoning. It is quite important to break down your town into different zones depending on the type of function that they would serve. So you can have a residential zone where like people would live, industrial, commercial, religious, depending on the type of districts that you want. Also, landmarks and important places to plan them out from ahead. So any kinds of landmarks you would want, big or small. Also, important place like everything that would be needed for quest designers. If they have an epic boss battle in the city center, like you need to mark out that space as well. Topology, we just talked about how important it is to plan it out from ahead and to see like how actually, I would actually say that topology would come first if this was in a most important listing because of it, as we said, it defines the shape. So like start with your topology and see how people would have adapted to this. Also historical context, so like if the town has been through multiple historical events, how did that shape? Maybe if it's a modern town, but it had a medieval past, maybe it would have a castle on like the highest position just because of they built it for strategic and defense purposes back then. It's used as a tourist attraction now, but nonetheless, that's how it got there. Also roads and transportation to like make sure that our locations are connected in a logical and easy to find and navigate way. Aesthetics, because why are we building something if it's not also aesthetically pleasing? And the storytelling, like what kind of story and what kind of like culture do you want to show and what kind of crafts are those people doing? So your distribution to make sure that it's made in a way where you can really see the process of things and how this would function. So I'm going to show you my process when I had to do Canterbury. It was quite an interesting town to build just because of how many historical layers it had. And I really wanted to use a lot of them to showcase the town in the best way possible. So the game was set in Anglo-Saxon Britain, and I had to like follow the story until that point. So first off, the town was built by the ancient Romans, and it was built because it had strategical and trade qualities to it. So like it was built on top of two big Roman roads, and also it had a river which connected the town very well with the remaining world. And what I found from this is, what are my defining elements? Well, first off, we have a big Roman wall that goes around the city. So that's quite defining for this town, and like people would expect to see it, probably. And then we have the amphitheater, which you've been spoiled that I ended up using actually. And we have a forum, and we have quite a lot of Roman buildings, so it was a big town. So where I want, I can really go wild with those and show the Roman past very clearly. Some time passed, the Romans left Britain, and the Anglo-Saxons settled into the ruins of this old Roman town. And at some point, they lived happily ever after, but some cool guy came along, who is this guy, Saint Augustine, and he was sent on a mission to baptize the Anglo-Saxons. He managed to do a pretty good job, and he established a church which later turned at the timeline of the game, it already turned into a very big religious complex, which was actually deemed the throne of Anglo-Saxon Christianity at that time. So we have quite the important location in our town. And this broke for some reason, some sort of censorship. But something else happened also around that time is that sadly, they got attacked by a Viking raid. And this was quite a big historical event just because of the Vikings managed to do quite a lot of damage. They didn't like pillage the whole place, and the cathedral actually withstood like most of the damage. So this is something interesting that I also can show in the town. It's like an additional historical layer. And topology-wise, it had a very defining and interesting element to it, this town, that it has a river that defines the town into an island and the rest of it. So even if you like walk towards it from afar on your horse, you can really see this defining, or like you fly with the bird, because like Assassin's Creed games had that element to them. You can really like by the topology say, oh, maybe this is Canterbury. Like I hope people actually did that. And also one topology thing is that this town was completely flat. So I had to find a way also to how to break it down a little, because like it's a game, it needs to look cool even though in real life it's so flat. And also something that has never happened to me before is that this town exists to this day. There are actual people who live there, and this is their whole like hometown. So I had to do a really good job, unless I didn't want to like any angry emails flying my way. So that was additional layer of being stressed about it. So I started using all kinds of maps that I can find. Quick disclaimer here, I am totally aware that this is not always the case when you make a town. I had the luck of this being very well documented throughout history, but I really think that you can use this no matter what you're making, because if you check out like any approximate like similar cultures or time periods, or like what your thing is actually based on, you can gain an understanding of the general like their idea of how to build things and why they build things. So yes, I did use a lot of maps from different time periods that were not related to the time period that I'm building at all even, but it really helped me to develop an overall general understanding of the space. And I also used like other Anglo-Saxon settlements and also other Roman ones, just to take all of this and combine it into this like fictional one. So after gaining an understanding, I started doing my shaping. I started putting my defining elements, so like the overall shape was very round of the city, also the river that I've told you about, and the wall that goes around. I placed like some roads that would lead to other locations in the world, so the whole world is very well connected. And I placed my important like landmarks and locations. We have the cathedral, the Roman theater, and forum, and one more church, because why not? There were quite a lot of churches there to begin with, so why not? And here I saw like the issue of this being so flat again, and I decided to like put a super slight curve of the terrain on pretty much the whole town. So because I really wanted the cathedral to stand out and have like that Disney castle sort of composition to it. So even though it's not historically accurate, it doesn't matter, because it needs to look good and feel good for the players. So that way, when you're inside, you don't feel the elevation that much, but if you're coming from somewhere far away, you can really see like the cathedral pop up and be all mighty and epic. So, quick disclaimer here as well, like for the sake of the presentation, I'm showing you, and this is how it turned out, but I just want to tell you like this took so many iterations, even though it's like historically inspired, and even though like I used so many maps, I still had to go through a lot of iterations to find out like what is the exact positioning of things that I like, where do I want the cathedral, like what is the actual shape of the walls of the town, what is the actual shape of the river, like all kinds of things. They take a lot of iterations to get right. So after picking one that I was happy with, I started doing my zoning. I'm going to show you 3 different types of zoning that I did for this town, and they all work together. So they're not like separate things, they're all just layers of how the world logic of the town functions and the story and culture that it wants to portray. So first off, I did the Viking raid. I wanted to plan out what the effect of that historical event was. So first off, I picked up where would it be logical for them to come from? And I picked one monastery which was nearby, and it was near the sea. So it would make sense that they would park their drakkar and then like continue onward to the town. So the first line of defense would be completely destroyed, because maybe the locals weren't prepared for such an event. After that, they crossed the first river. They managed to do some damage to the island as well. But luckily, they got stopped. So the rest of the town remained pretty much intact. I wanted to do this on purpose because I wanted to show different stages. So it's not just like completely destroyed all of it, or like completely it's fine, you wouldn't even notice that someone has come here and done something. I wanted to separate it in a way that you see like really the amount of destruction, then how life goes on, and like that people are starting to rebuild, and like lots of new structures are being constructed, and then the intact, to have that sort of comparison to what it was before and to serve as a contrast to the half of the town which is not okay. Also, something to support that world logic even further is that I would need some sort of defense, like some sort of a garrison or barracks, anything to explain why would the Vikings like attack and suddenly go back? Like they would have had to be pushed out. So I added one military location that is completely fictional, but it helps me with delivering such a environmental story in this place. And so, also, I put some extra walls that are not there on the historical maps, but who cares? But I wanted to show like even more to further the feeling of why the cathedral wasn't attacked and is intact. So I wrapped even more walls around it. And sadly, I also had to incorporate a graveyard near this town to really show like how impactful, apart from the destruction, this attack was. The next zoning that I did for the town, on top of this one, is the general like districts zoning. So I had a religious zone, so like all kinds of religious related structures and activities I would place here to make sense. I also did like my markets and crafts, also the military that we just added, and some residential, and also important to not forget the outskirts, because we don't want to look at our town in isolation, we wanted to blend with the rest of the world. So I do this to plan out what kind of locations I'll place. So if I want to place a baker, I'm not going to put them in the military, unless he's the military baker for some reason. Or if I want to place like a scribe or school, that would make sense in the farm. So this is a way that I structure my world logic, structure my structures, amazing English, into thematical places. And last but not least, I planned out where I'm going to show more Roman architecture and when I'm going to show more Anglo-Saxon architecture. So I divided the town like this to really show the contrast of what it was before, to really show this part of the town's history, and plan out like how people are using it now and how are they living among these ruins. It really helped me with the town wall, because I didn't want to place a giant wall that goes around the town, just because of I had no idea how I'm going to fill it with any sort of meaningful gameplay, and also it didn't look good because the town looked like very confined, and I want to be like open and inviting from each side that you can come from. So I picked just like several different spots where I would just hint the wall, so it's actually like there's more missing of it than there actually is wall, but because you can see at some points that it is there, you can make up in your mind that actually it goes around the whole town, which is quite a cool trick. And at the end, this is what we ended up with. This is how the town looks like. I don't know if you can see it well. I hope it's fine. So if you walk into it, if you load Valhalla now and go look at it, please do, you can really see that this zoning is still there, it's still present, and it really helped me define my spaces. So it still has the destroyed area, which is like completely destroyed. We have the damaged one, which has a lot of construction being built, as we said, a lot of warehouses storing materials. So it is like rebuilding and overcoming. It took that theme. And we also have the comparison of how it was before. And the other zoning that I showed you, we have the different districts, the thematical districts. So here, as I told you, I used it to plan out my spaces. So like in the religious one, I have priests' living spaces. I have St. Augustine's grave for like the history nerds to nerd out. I have a scriber school. I have even a wedding venue, because there was a fun fact that like Anglo-Saxons used to marry Vikings or like Northerners in order to like for peace reasons. So I even wanted to add like a little Easter egg of that part of history as well. Why not? the market and crafts, I put all kinds of character maintenance things there, and also like just to show like what the crafts of people used to be there. Also, we have the amphitheater with the pig, which is actually an oracle pig, because why not? And for the military camp, I did something really cool that I think it fit. It's really sad, but I like how it fit the general town. But inside of the military, I did a little twist of the like kill the captain and get the treasure thing gameplay. So I got the captain and I locked him inside of his room, and because like the explanation was that he was paranoid after the attack. He developed some sort of PTSD, so like you could really see how the attack affected the people themselves and their behavior. And the residential, I used it for like some micro stories to show how the Anglo-Saxon way of life was. So like how their house is like, what their backyards are like. They really tell you a story of who is this person and what do they do in their day-to-day life. And this area, which was a residential but was destroyed, as I told you, houses under construction. People were placing barricades to prepare for a next attack. And there's also a lot of materials in warehouses, and there's a church that was destroyed that is now collecting donations to be rebuilt. So this is it again. So finally, the takeaways I would love for you to walk out from this talk with is that the universal acceptance and like understanding of real-world rules and functions can really make your town, or in that fact, any locations that you do, a lot more universally understood. So you can use this as a tool. It's not like the only way to do it, it's just a way to do it, to ensure that people might understand your town better. Also, if you try to imagine people's life in your town, it can really help you to understand how the space is used and feel it lived in. Also, I absolutely recommend using zoning to plan out different layers of your town, just because towns are very complex locations, as you probably saw, and it's good to start with that mindset of zoning it out. And finally, towns are freaking amazing, and I hope you manage to fall in love with them as much as I have. And thank you so much for coming. Thank you. I think we have some time for questions, maybe.
Yeah, first of all, thank you very much for this presentation. It was just awesome, like super informative. Because I also like kind of work on it. So, I mean, on cities, towns. So my question is, well, I don't know, a bit maybe nerdy, I don't know. Which tools do you use for creating layouts? Like, because you showed some kind of 3D screenshots. Also, I saw like a lot of 2D drawings. And yeah, so what kind of software do you use for preparing those stuff? Thank you.
Yes, so I use a couple. It depends, like in different moments, different things trigger my imagination, let's say. But I use my iPad, so like Procreate. I use also PowerPoint. I like to do spaces in that as well. And with the animations, you can really prototype some different layers and everything. I use Miro, also is very, very cool. Because you can put even sticky notes and stuff. Also, Miro is the same as Miro. You can use that as well. And good old paper. So for 2D, that's my main things. For 3D, what I do is just gray box it in the engine that I have. So like Unreal. You can get Unreal, use the Unreal modeling, and just plan out something. So that's pretty much it.
So is it something that can generate something, or you just put every single house manually?
No, I don't use anything that generates. I just do. So the screenshots that I saw from Assassin's Creed, over there, it's quite a big team. So you would have artists that will help you out with the assets, and you would plan out your shapes, but you would have people to actually make those beautiful assets. So if you don't have that, Unreal modeling is absolutely amazing.
Awesome. Thank you very much.
Thank you also for the question.
Hey, great presentation. I wanted to ask you about the iterations, because you mentioned there was a lot of them for Canterbury, for example, and I was wondering how many of those iterations were done on like paper design stage, and how many of them were done in engine, and how did those in engine phases look like? Like, did you do everything in gray boxes and stuff like that, and only then move to proper level art? And so I wanted to know what was the pipeline for doing it in different stages, from paper to final version.
Yes. Well, the pipeline really differentiated from like one location to the other. But generally, what I do is I focus on paper a lot. So I spend a lot of time to really plan out where my spaces would be. So I have a clear idea of what I want to do when I go to the 3D. Then when I go to the 3D, it's completely different than what I imagined it would be like. So I start with basic gray box. I put like my biggest shape, so like the cathedral will be a big gray box over there, so I can really look it around from everywhere and establish, do I really like it, and start moving. Like, I do a lot of paper iterations, but I use them as a starting point, really. So after that, it's gray box mainly, and then a lot of cooperation with my artists to make it beautiful. So that's pretty much it, really.
Okay, thank you. And a follow-up question. So the same for the review process. You are probably doing reviews for all of those stages, right? So you get like acceptance for your directors on every of those, or is it like, do you have free reign up till, for example, the gray box stage? I was wondering how you handle that.
Well, I guess, again, it depended on location to location. You do go through like official reviews with like more higher ups, but the thing that helped me the most is to gather the fellow level designers and artists and to look at it together to get like their point of view. So what I did most is regular reviews with my peers. That was like the best thing that helped out. And like to check out their locations, get inspired from that, to like exchange experience. So regular, like whenever I feel finished with something, even like one district, because like town is pretty huge, so I can't like wait for the whole thing to be complete. So like different locations within it, or different districts, I would go and ask my peers around, or I would just go and poke like a director or a lead or anything to like get their opinion also. So yeah, but it really goes through a lot of iterations throughout the whole process for sure.
Thanks, great answers, bye.
Thank you. So I think that's all. Thank you so much for coming again. Bye.